The Gemara cites another discussion concerning the sheep and loaves of Shavuot. The sages taught in a Bereta, if one slaughtered the 2 sheep as required, but they were accompanied by 4 loaves, rather than the requisite 2 loaves, he draws 2 of the loaves from the 4 and waves them together with the sheep. All right, 48a. And the rest of the loaves are permitted to be eaten through redemption. The sages said the following before Rav Hizda. This Bereta is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who holds that the slaughter of the sheep grants the loaves inherent sanctity. And in this case, 2 of the loaves have inherent sanctity, but it is not known which ones. As if the Bereta is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, since he says that the slaughter of the sheep consecrates the loaves with inherent sanctity, when the Bereta states that he redeems the loaves, where does he redeem them? The process of redemption would be to place all 4 loaves in front of him and state that whichever 2 of the loaves do not have inherent sanctity are redeemed for money. If he redeems them outside of the temple courtyard, since it is written, and the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before the Lord with the 2 lambs. Leviticus 23:20. He disqualifies the 2 loaves that possess inherent sanctity by causing them to leave the courtyard, at which point they are no longer before the Lord. Conversely, if he redeems them inside the courtyard, once the 2 loaves that do not possess inherent sanctity are redeemed, he violates the prohibition against bringing non-sacred items into the temple courtyard. Rav Hizda said to them, actually, the Bereta is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and one redeems the loaves inside the courtyard. Nevertheless, it is not considered to be a violation of the prohibition against bringing non-sacred items into the courtyard because the non-sacred loaves came into the courtyard by themselves, i.e., they were already there when they became non-sacred and were not actively brought into the courtyard in their non-sacred state. Ravina said to Rav Ashi, but isn't it taught in a Bereta with regard to this very case? When he redeems the loaves, he may redeem them only outside of the courtyard. This contradicts Rav Hizda's claim that according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, one redeems the loaves inside the courtyard. Rav Ashi answered, this Bereta is certainly in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, because if it were in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, when he brings the loaves outside the courtyard, he thereby disqualifies them by causing them to leave the courtyard. Rava, son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, let us say that the Bereta, which states that if the sheep of Shavuot are slaughtered with 4 loaves instead of 2, 2 of the 4 are invested with inherent sanctity, is a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Rabbi Yohanan that was stated with regard to a thanks offering that one slaughtered accompanied by 80 loaves rather than the required 40. In that case, Hizkiah says, 40 of the 80 loaves are consecrated, And Rabbi Yohanan says, not even 40 of the 80 loaves are consecrated. The Gemara answers, wasn't it stated with regard to this dispute that Rabbi Ze'era says, everyone, even Rabbi Yohanan, concedes that in a case where the individual brings the offering said, let 40 of the 80 loaves be consecrated, that 40 are consecrated. Here too one can say that the Bereda is referring to a case where one said, let 2 of the 4 loaves be consecrated. The Gemara cites another discussion concerning the sheep and loaves of Shavuot. Rabbi Hanina Tarata taught a Bereta before Rabbi Yohanan. If one slaughtered 4 sheep for Shavuot rather than the required 2, accompanied by 2 loaves, he draws 2 of the sheep out of the 4 and sprinkles their blood not for the sake of the sheep of Shavuot. He then sprinkles the blood of the other sheep for the sake of the sheep of Shavuot. As if you do not say to do this, but rather require him to first sprinkle the blood of 2 of the sheep for their own sake, then you have caused the loss of the latter 2 sheep. Since they were previously fit to have their blood sprinkled on the altar for the sake of the sheep of Shavuot, and were disqualified from this status when the blood of their other 2 sheep was sprinkled for that purpose, they are no longer fit to have their blood sprinkled even for the sake of a different offering. Rabbi Yohanan said to Rabbi Hanina Tarata, and does the court say to a person, arise and sin in order that you may gain? Is it proper for the priest to sprinkle the blood of the first pair, not for their own sake, so that the second pair will remain fit? But didn't we learn in a Mishnah, Zevahim 77a, that Tanaim disagree concerning this matter? The Mishnah teaches, in the case of the limbs of a sin offering, whose flesh is eaten by priests and may not be burned on the altar, that were intermingled with the limbs of a burnt offering, which are burned on the altar, Rabbi Elazar says, the priest shall place all the limbs above on the altar, and I view the flesh of the limbs of the sin offering above on the altar as though they are pieces of wood burned on the altar, not an offering. And the rabbis say, one should wait until the form of all the intermingled limbs decays, and they will all go out to the place of burning in the temple courtyard, where all disqualified offerings of the most sacred order are burned. Rabbi Yohanan continued, according to your opinion, why do the rabbis say that the mixture is burned? Let the court say to the priest instead, arise and sin by burning all the limbs on the altar, including the limbs of the sin offering, in order that you may gain by performing the mitzvah of sacrificing the limbs of the burnt offering. Rabbi Hanina Tarata answered Rabbi Yohanan, we do say, arise and sin with a sin offering, in order that you may gain with regard to a sin offering, since it is the same type of offering. Similarly, one may sin with regard to the sheep of Shavuot in order to gain with regard to the other sheep brought for the same offering. We do not say, arise and sin with a sin offering in order that you may gain with regard to a burnt offering. Therefore the rabbis prohibit burning the limbs of the sin offering on the altar in order to allow for the burning of the limbs of the burnt offering. Rabbi Yohanan asked Rabbi Hanina Tarata, "And does the court actually say, 'Arise and sin in order that you may gain,' in a case where the sin and the gain are with regard to one matter? But isn't it taught in a Bereta concerning a case of the 2 sheep of Shavuot, where one slaughtered them not for their own sake, or where he slaughtered them either before their time, i.e. before Shavuot, or after their time, that the blood shall be sprinkled, although it shall be sprinkled for the sake of a peace offering, and the meat shall be eaten?" Rabbi Yohanan continued, "And if the festival was on Shabbat, one may not sprinkle the blood. The sacrificial portions may not be burned on the altar, and the meat may not be eaten. This is because the improper slaughter of the sheep disqualified them as communal offerings, whereas individual offerings may not be sacrificed on Shabbat. But if the priest, nevertheless, sprinkled the blood of these sheep on Shabbat, the offering is accepted in that it is permitted to burn its sacrificial portions on the altar in the evening, after the conclusion of Shabbat, and then the meat may be eaten." Rabbi Yohanan concluded his proof, "But according to your opinion, why is it not permitted to sprinkle the blood on Shabbat? Let the court say, 'Arise and sin by sprinkling the blood of these offerings in order that you may gain, by being able to burn their sacrificial portions in the evening, and then eat their meat.'" Rabbi Hanina Tarata answered, "We do say, 'Arise and sin on Shabbat in order that you may gain on Shabbat.' We do not say, 'Arise and sin on Shabbat in order that you may gain on a weekday.'" The Gemara asks, "And is it so that with regard to 2 separate matters, the court does not say that one should sin with regard to one in order to gain with regard to the other? But didn't we learn in a Mishnah, Terumat 8:9, in the case of a barrel of wine that is teruma, that broke in the upper section of a wine press, and in the lower section of the wine press there is non-sacred, impure wine, and the wine that is teruma will flow into the lower press and become impure? Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehashua both concede that if one is able to rescue even a quarter log of the wine that is teruma in a pure vessel so that it retains its ritual purity, he should rescue it, even if in the process the rest of the wine that is teruma will mix with the non-sacred wine. This will cause the owner a financial loss, because the wine that is teruma will become impure, causing the entire mixture to become prohibited for consumption. But if not, i.e., one can save any of the wine that is teruma, e.g., if one does not have any pure vessels in which to collect it. 48b. Rabbi Eliezer says, 48b, the teruma wine should be allowed to descend and become impure on its own, ruining the non-sacred wine in the lower press, but one should not render it impure through his direct action by catching it in an impure vessel, even though catching it would prevent the wine that is teruma from mixing with his impure, non-sacred wine. And Rabbi Yehoshua says, since the wine that is teruma will become impure in any event, one may even render it impure through his direct action in order to save his non-sacred wine. This indicates that according to Rabbi Yehoshua, it is permitted to sin with regard to one matter, i.e. the wine that is teruma, in order to gain with regard to another matter, i.e. the non-sacred wine. The Gemara responds, it is different there in the case of the wine, because the wine that is teruma is going to become impure in any event. Consequently, his action is not considered a sin, and this is not a case of sinning with regard to one matter in order to gain in another. The Gemara continues its discussion of the sheep of Shavuot. When Rav Yitzhak came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he reported traditions that he learned in Eretz Yisrael, and he taught a Bereta. With regard to a case of the two sheep of Shavuot, where one slaughtered them not in accordance with their mitzvah, e.g., he slaughtered them for the sake of a different offering, they are disqualified, and they should be left overnight until their form decays, and they attain the status of leftover sacrificial meat, and then they are brought out to the place designated for burning. Rav Naaman said to Rav Yitzhak, the master, i.e., Rav Yitzhak, who compares the sheep of Shavuot to a sin offering because they are juxtaposed in a verse. See Leviticus 23:19, teaches, the sheep are disqualified like a sin offering that was slaughtered not for its own sake. By contrast, the Tana of the school of Levi, who derives the halakha with regard to an obligatory peace offering, e.g. the two sheep of Shavuot, from the halakha concerning a voluntary peace offering, teaches that the two sheep remain valid offerings, just as a voluntary peace offering remains valid even if it is slaughtered for the sake of a different offering. As Levi teaches, and with regard to the other peace offerings of a Nazirite, that one slaughtered not in accordance with their mitzvah, they are valid offerings like voluntary peace offerings, but they do not satisfy the obligation of the owner to bring the required Nazirite peace offerings. And these offerings are eaten for only 1 day and 1 night, in accordance with the halakha concerning the peace offerings of Nazirite, and not for 2 days and 1 night like voluntary peace offerings. They require neither bread nor the foreleg until the required peace offering of a Nazirite. The Gemara raises an objection to the opinion of Rav Yitzhak from that which was taught in a Bereta, in a case where one is obligated to sacrifice as a guilt offering an animal in its first year, which the Torah calls a lamb, and instead he brought an animal in its second year, which is considered a ram, or if he is obligated to sacrifice as a guilt offering an animal in its second year, and he brought an animal in its first year, the offerings are disqualified. They are not to be left overnight until their form decays and are brought out to the place designated for burning. But in the case of the burnt offering of a Nazirite, i.e. the lamb that is sacrificed when he completes his Naziriteship, or the burnt offering of a woman after childbirth, i.e. the lamb she sacrifices on the 41st day after giving birth to a son, or on the 81st day after giving birth to a daughter, or the burnt offering of a leper, i.e. the lamb that is sacrificed after he is purified. In all of these cases, if the animals were in their second year instead, and one slaughtered them, the offerings are valid. The Baraita concludes, the principle of the matter is, any animal that is valid as a voluntary burnt offering is also valid as an obligatory burnt offering, and any animal that is disqualified as a sin offering is also disqualified as a guilt offering, except for an offering that was sacrificed not for its own sake, which is disqualified in the case of a sin offering, but not a guilt offering. This demonstrates that the halakot of obligatory burnt offerings are derived from those of voluntary burnt offerings, despite the fact that the burnt offering of a Nazirite is juxtaposed to the sin offering of a Nazirite. See Numbers 6:14. And the burnt offering of a leper is juxtaposed to the sin offering of a leper. See Leviticus 14:19. Similarly, the halakha pertaining to the sheep of Shavuot, which are obligatory peace offerings, should be derived from the halakha pertaining to voluntary peace offerings, and not from the halakha pertaining to a sin offering, as Rav Yitzhak holds. The Gemara answers, this Tana who taught this Baraita is the Tana of the school of Levi cited earlier, who holds that if one slaughters a sheep of Shavuot not for its own sake, it is nevertheless valid. The Gemara discusses the opinion of Rav Naaman, who maintains that the Tana of the school of Levi holds that a sheep of Shavuot slaughtered, not for its own sake, is valid because he derives its halakha from that of a voluntary peace offering. Come and hear what Levi teaches to the contrary. As Levi teaches, the guilt offering of a Nazirite, i.e., the lamb he brings on the 8th day after becoming impure through contact with a corpse, and the guilt offering of a leper, i.e., the lamb he brings at the completion of his purification, that one slaughtered not for their sake, are valid, but they did not satisfy the obligation of the owner. If one slaughtered them when the time had not yet arrived for their owners to sacrifice these offerings, or they were in their second year instead of their first year and one slaughtered them, they are disqualified. The Gemara comments, but if it is so that Levi derives the halakot of an obligatory offering from those of a voluntary one, let him derive the halakha of the guilt offering from that of the peace offering, in which case the guilt offerings should be valid even if they were in the second year. The Gemara answers, Levi derives the halakha concerning an obligatory peace offering from the halakha concerning a voluntary peace offering, but he does not derive the halakha concerning a guilt offering from the halakha concerning a peace offering. The Gemara further challenges the statement of Rav Naaman. But if Levi derives the halakha of an obligatory peace offering from that of a voluntary peace offering, let him similarly derive the halakha of one guilt offering from that of another guilt offering. He should derive that guilt offering of a Nazirite and the guilt offering of a leper are valid even if the animal is in its second year from the halakha concerning a guilt offering for robbery and a guilt offering for misuse of consecrated property, which are supposed to be a ram in its second year. Or if one brought a lamb in its first year as a guilt offering for robbery or a guilt offering for misuse of consecrated property, Levi should derive that it is valid from the halakha concerning the guilt offering of a Nazirite and the guilt offering of a leper, which are lambs in their first year. Rav Shimi bar Ashi said, one can derive the halakha with regard to an item that is prepared not in its valid manner, e.g., the sheep of Shavuot that were slaughtered not for their own sake, from the halakha with regard to another item that is prepared not in its valid manner, e.g., a voluntary peace offering slaughtered not for its own sake, but one cannot derive the halakha with regard to an item that is prepared not in its valid manner, e.g., the guilt offering of a Nazirite or a leper that is sacrificed when it is in its second year, from the halakha with regard to an item that is prepared in its valid manner, e.g., a guilt offering for robbery or for misuse of consecrated property that is sacrificed when it is in its second year. The Gemara asks, and can one not derive the halakha with regard to disqualified offerings from the halakha with regard to fit offerings? But isn't it taught in a bereta, from where it is derived with regard to an item that left the temple courtyard and was thereby disqualified, that if it nevertheless ascended upon the altar, it shall not descend? It is derived from the fact that an item that left is valid for sacrifice on a private altar. The bereta derives the halakha with regard to a disqualified offering from the halakha with regard to a fit offering. Okay, that's the end of Menachot 48. That was 48b. Well, it was 48a and b.